course, we run into a technical difficulty right now.
There we go.
There we are.
Hey,
All
everybody, we fixed
right.
it.
Hey, it's the Watchers. We are Drew and JC. We are here with a Horror Watchers episode. We have an awesome, dare I say, historical guest with us today, and I'm really excited to speak with him. And you all know the drill, though. We got to play the intro first, and then we'll introduce him.
Beep boop intro. I feel like I've heard that back to back now.
Without further ado, we'll kick it over to our guest to allow him a moment to introduce himself to everybody.
I'm Donald Farmer. I'm best known as a writer-director of a lot of movies that mainly go to video stores or to streaming or to Blu-ray or DVD. I've been making movies professionally since 1986 when I made my first feature, Demon Queen, which was released the following year on by Mogul Communications. Some of my other movies were Cannibal Hookers, Vampire Cop, Savage Vengeance, Dream, Invasion of the Scream Queens, my documentary about horror actresses. Then I did, in the 90s, I did a bunch of shot-on-film movies, starting with Vampire Cop, and then I did Deadly Run, Compelling Evidence, Vicious Kiss, Demolition Highway, Fighting Chance, Battle for Glory, Blood and Honor, and Deadly Memories. Those were all shot on 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. And then I started shooting digital in 2000, 24 years ago, when I made an erotic vampire in Paris with Aaron Brown, aka Misty Mundy, that we shot in Paris. That was probably my first shot on digital movie. And because before then, when I used to shoot on video, I shot on old, like 3/4 inch or Beta SB. And so once I started shooting on digital, then in the 200s, I guess, or whatever you call it, 2000s, started in the year 2000, I made 2 movies that year, Erotic Vampire in Paris with Aaron, and then I made Deadly Memories, where I had Robert Zadar, best known as the Maniac Cop, and I had William Smith, who was in Conan the Barbarian and Red Dawn and a bunch of big movies. Any Which Way You Can, with Any Which Way But Loose with the Clint Eastwood, where he fights Clint Eastwood. So I had those 2 guys. Then I had Tina Krause, who's a big scream queen, who's in Frank Henenlotter's Bad Biology. And then after that, I made Dorm of the Dead with Tiffany Shepis and Chainsaw Cheerleaders with Tiffany Shepis. So I made 2 movies back to back with her. And then after that, I took a couple years off and didn't do anything. And then I started getting into a groove of making about 1 movie a year. So from there, I made Shark Exorcist, Cannibal Hookers, Cannibal Cop, Cannibal Hookers, Hooker with a Hacksaw, Bigfoot Exorcist, Shark Exorcist 2, Debbie Does Demons. Then I made Blood Bitch Baby and Darby Screamhouse, which are brand new ones, which haven't come out yet. And then I also make a bunch of anthology movies that I produce, where it's a bunch of short segments, like an old Amicus anthology movie, in the tradition of House of Drip Blood or Tales from the Crypt. So the anthology movies I produced are Nun Dead, Catnado, and Amityville Alien, which I just finished. And right now I'm in production on Wereshark, which is sort of a werewolf movie where he turns into a shark instead of a werewolf. And then later this year or early next year, I'll be doing Catnado 2. So that sort of brings you up to date. I'm also a writer. I've written for Fangoria, national magazines. I've been a correspondent on the CBS Early Show. I've been a VH1 reality TV personality. I was on a big reality TV show on VH1. And so anyway, but that, in a nutshell, that's sort of my credits.
I mean, you have such a plethora of awesome things to talk about, but I have to divert for just a second and ask you about the VH1 reality show, because that era of VH1 is my VH1 when they had like the Surreal Life and all of that stuff on there.
Yeah, that was during the golden age of VH1 where they were doing all these hot shows. Like they had the Bret Michaels show where he was trying to pick a girlfriend, and they had My Fair Brady, where one of the Brady Bunch guys shows you into his married life. And so anyway, there was this reality TV star at VH1 who had done a couple of hot reality shows for them called Megan Hausram, and she was one of the girls that dated Bret Michaels on his reality show. And then she did another reality show with Sharon Osbourne, and her two reality shows were such big hits, and that VH1 decided to give her her own reality show that she could be the star of. And so that's the one I was on. I was on this show. It was called Megan Wants a Millionaire, where she has 17 bachelors that she lives in a mansion with, and I was one of the bachelors. And some of the bachelors are millionaires and some of them aren't. I was just able to claim that I was a bachelor on paper because one of my friends who's a film producer told me that if you own a movie outright, you can appraise it at $250,000 value. And I said, oh, well, I own 8 movies outright, so that must mean I'm worth $2 million, but it's not liquid because nobody's paying me that much for them. So anyway, I told VH1 that. They said, okay, well, you qualify to be on the show. You're on paper, $2 million, even though, just on paper, it's not real. So they qualified me to be on Megan Wants a Millionaire. And so I was one of the so-called millionaires, many of whom were not really billionaires, that lived in this mansion. And so we all have to date Megan, and she has to pick one of us. And before we're allowed to date Megan, we have to date Megan's girlfriend, and then Megan's girlfriend gives her a report to us. And then my show got pretty controversial because one of our bachelors, the show was filmed in February 2009, and it didn't air till 6 months later in around August 2009. And 3 weeks into our show, we aired like 3 episodes, and including everything I did, I was just on the first 2 episodes because I was the 4th one kicked off. Every episode she kicks off bachelors, and I wasn't the first one kicked off, but I think I was the 4th one kicked off. And so every episode she would kick off people, and so 3 episodes aired, and then before the 4th episode could air, one of the bachelors made the national news for murdering his wife. As it turns out, after the show ended and he had not been selected by Megan and he had been rejected, he was so upset by being rejected by Megan, because he basically was one of the 2 finalists and he thought he was going to be picked, that in despair, he just married the first girl he met at a bar. And then he and this girl had a very volatile relationship, and he ended up murdering her. And so there was a big story. There was a national manhunt for this guy who was on the run after murdering his wife. And so they caught him, and they chased him all the way to the Canadian border. And then before they could arrest him, he hung himself in his hotel room, but rather than allow himself to be arrested. So all the publicity from this murderer being on our show caused VH1 to immediately cancel it. So after 3 episodes, the other episodes were never aired, although Megan has since uploaded most of them to YouTube. So you can see most of the episodes, including some of the ones that were not aired on YouTube, thanks to Megan. But I still got quite a lot of notoriety for being on that show. I didn't realize so many people watched those shows, but actually for a month after it aired, I was recognized in public at least once a day, everywhere I went, no matter where I went, at least once a day somebody would recognize me. And it was very freaky, being treated like a celebrity. And then after about a month, it died off and nobody recognized me anymore.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the usual run for those old reality shows. But yeah, they were huge.
I didn't realize so many people watch those VH1 reality shows. But
yeah. I mean, they started. I was still in high school when they started. It was like Best Week Ever, and Flavor of Love, and Tommy Lee Goes to College. So I was pretty much. Oh, we lost JC. I was pretty much addicted to the VH1 reality shows for a while. I was even buying them on home media. I bought them, all the DVD releases that they put out. I was super into them. So yeah, I actually didn't know that, but it makes sense because I do remember that show being canceled. I just did not know that that was the reason why. So that's insane.
Yeah,
At least your episodes aired though before they pulled it.
yeah. Everything I shot was aired, but some of the other guys who didn't have anything to do in the first 3 episodes where they were just saving them for later, their stuff never aired, and so some of the guys got really screwed. But everything, I was like the main one on the first episode. I got more screen time than pretty much anybody else on the first episode, so I got I got a lot of I got a lot of response. And but from being on that show, I was then invited to be on the talk on the E channel. So I was on the talk. I mean, not that I was on the Soup,
Yeah, yeah,
where they reviewed reality shows. And then the girl from Boy Meets World, Danielle Fishnell or whatever, she had her own
yeah,
show on the E channel called
yeah.
The Dish. So I was on her show, The Dish. And then I was on the CBS morning show in New York City, where they flew me all expense to New York City to be on the morning show. So I had a run of. Nancy Grace wanted me on her show too, but I couldn't do her
Oh
show.
wow.
She wanted to take me at the same day that CBS wanted me. So for a while there, it was very bizarre. I never got this attention for doing movies, but for being on this stupid reality show, suddenly I get all this attention.
Oh, I get it. I tried to put us on a reality show. We pretty famously tried to put this show on what was it? Shark Tank.
Yeah,
We got
Shark Tank.
we got into the second round of discussions with producers, and then they let us know that they passed. So all of the stuff that we had filmed for it privately is now on our channel for anybody to go look and watch and check out
Interesting for sure.
this little piece of time, like a time capsule where we auditioned to be on it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to segue into this, but
I mean, I like last year I met one of the stars of Shark Tank. The guy that runs it, Marcus Lamone. I met him because he's
yeah.
like, I think he's the main producer of Shark Tank. He
Yeah,
mainly is the CEO and owner of all the Camping World stores in America.
okay. Yeah, they liked us at least as a joke. At the time, we were doing more Bigfoot stuff. Like we hadn't really broke into what the show is now, and we started out just talking about Bigfoot, and we kind of like developed this following that way. And I don't know, the casting director liked us or something because there's no reason why this silly Bigfoot show should have ever even made it that far into conversations to be on there. We're not really a business. I don't like our whole audition tape
Yeah.
was just us kind of making fun of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to listen to the Art Bell radio show whenever he would have a Bigfoot episode. He had these people that were really semi-convincing. They almost really had you believing in Bigfoot. They were so convincing.
Oh yeah, no, that's still out there, man. They those people are still out there. They're still very
going.
convincing, and YouTube now has created a scenario where they can be like paid donations and just, you know, rack up all kinds of spare money. It's a crazy world. I'm honestly kind of glad to be out of it and talking about stuff I'm super passionate about, like movies, because it was draining on my psyche and my mentality. Like there were times where you'd be talking to somebody, and I just, as a journalist, I want to feature the truth. You know, I'm not Art Bell, so nobody is. As far as an entertaining aspect goes, like nobody's ever going to be Art Bell. So
Yeah, nobody's really been able to fill Art Bell's shoes. His show was so incredible. I used to listen to it all the time. Sometimes he would have UFO people, and he would have all these psychics that claimed they could remote view and find anything in the world, like a missing person. They could find them by making a psychic contact. And then I ended up meeting a couple of people that had been on the Art Bell show who claimed to be psychics, and I interviewed them. And one of the most interesting people I interviewed was this guy that's on Art Bell all the time named Whitley Strieber that wrote the book Communion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Whitley.
Where it was made into a movie starring Christopher Walken. I interviewed him twice, and the second time I interviewed him, he was like telling me to examine his ears because he said, when I was abducted by aliens, they had planted a metal chip in my ear, and if you look really close at my ear, you could see the outline of the metal chip. So I
Yeah.
looked, and sure, you can see a little square outline on his ear that looks like the metal is under the skin of his ear. And then
That's
after
awesome.
that, he said, I have a photo I smuggled out of Area 51 of a real alien. The government would kill me if they knew I had this photo, but I'm going to let you see it. But take a photo of it with your phone. I'm just going to hold it up, and you have to walk up to me, and I'll show it to you really quick. So I walked up to him, and he showed me the photo, and it looked like it could have been. It looked like something Rick Baker could have made.
That's great. I only had like really brief discussions with him. So the Watchers actually started because about a year ago I had this silly idea of making a documentary about Art Bell, and so I was trying to get that project off the ground, and his family really didn't want to do it, and the people who own his audio refused to do any deals whatsoever. Even I talked to the producer of Coast to Coast Now, and he said like I could offer $10 million and they would still say no. It's just a policy that they don't license or release any of the audio. So that project falling apart turned into the podcast that we now have. So it's so weird that you brought Art Bell up like that. That's like a synchronicity that we always kind of talk about on some of the older shows that we did talk about that stuff.
It's mostly
kind
true.
of
Yeah, Whitney Strieber, after Art Bell's show, he had his own radio show for a while called The Undiscovered Country. I don't know if he still has it or not, but he was sort of like Art Bell, not
yeah.
quite as bizarre as Art Bell. He always made more of an effort to try to convince you that what he was saying was real, whereas
Right.
Art Bell said like he didn't really care whether you believed him or not.
Well, back in 2015, I was a contributor for Dark Matter Digital News Network. And so while Art was doing his final shows on Midnight in the Desert, Whitley Strieber aired right after Midnight in the Desert at 1 a.m. And I think the show is called Dreamland, but I might
Oh yeah,
not.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, so he had that show as well, which I think is still some variation of it still exists. But yeah, I had talked to Whitley when I was trying to get that documentary off the ground, and it was a complete and total colossal failure. But I think as the year has progressed, the show's kind of become this insane thing that I couldn't even have imagined from the get go. So
yeah. The
uh,
first time I interviewed Whitley was in '83, before he had claimed to be abducted, and back then he was just known mainly for writing these two books that had been made into huge movies. He had written this book Wolfen, which was made into a huge werewolf movie, and then he wrote this vampire book, The Hunger, that was made into a huge vampire movie with David Bowie and Susan Sarandon. So when I
yeah,
interviewed him, and that was what he was known for. He was the Hunger and the Wolfen guy.
right, and that a lot of people kind of discredited his alien stuff because of his background as a writer. So, um, I, if nothing else, what we got was a very interesting Christopher Walken performance when they
Yeah.
made Communion into a film. So that I still cherish that movie. But again, I don't know how to segue to it after this discussion, but something that I like really wanted to try to pick your brain about was the shot on video era. Um, that's something that over time I've really come to appreciate. I really like the art form, and I'm glad that due to boutique companies like Vinegar Syndrome and Saturn's Core and all of the partner labels, that shot on video is kind of experiencing a renaissance. I know at least one of your movies, it Red Lips, was put out by
Yeah,
Saturn's Core.
yeah, they've
Um,
done really, really well with it. They've. I mean, I get commission reports from it every 2 or 3 months, and I have for like 2 years, and it's just amazing. The sales of that are just like not. I've had way bigger movies that haven't had a fraction of the sales that Red Lips has had. So Red Lips has done really,
Interesting.
really well.
Well, it's insane the threshold that Vinegar Syndrome has been able to create in the physical media world. It's like crazy to think like 10 years ago they just started out with just like putting out like old 42nd Street smut and like porn stuff, and now here they are putting out some of the best transfers in the world. And was it? I know they put Showgirls out, but Roadhouse. Like there's a 4K of Roadhouse from Vinegar Syndrome. So it's kind of insane to see how that company has grown and what it's become and all of the
Oh yeah, I
offshoots.
love Vinegar Syndrome. I have quite a lot of their stuff. I just got their new version of the Klaus Kinski movie, Paganini, that he directed, and I think that was the last film he did before he passed. So I was really excited to get a deluxe version of that.
Yeah, I was a subscriber for a little bit. I can't quite afford it right now, but I think I will subscribe again in the future. But yeah, it's a fantastic company. But that's definitely kind of how I got into shot on video. I remember the video store that I had growing up. I was lucky enough to have a mom and pop. I didn't have Blockbuster or anything like that. It was called Vicky's Video in Katanning, and then I had another one in Katanning, PA, for the Pennsylvania listeners that follow us, and it was like a multi-tiered, multi-level, and the horror section you had to go down like this winding staircase, and there was the whole basement of this building was the horror section. So I do remember coming across certain movies back then, but really as an adult here over the last couple of years is where I've been able to really truly appreciate shot on video stuff. I think even just as an art form.
There were several years in the 80s where every video store in America was a mom and pop store, where there were nothing but mom and pop stores, and that's the environment that I started making films in. It wasn't until later that the chains like Blockbuster Video and Hollywood Video came along and started trying to run everything and ran a lot of the mom and pops out of business. But most people started being able to buy video cassette recorders for their home, where you could buy the cassettes and tape stuff off TV. That started around 79. And so by 1980, that business was really hot. And very quickly after video cassette recorders went on the market, then it was only like a year or two later that companies started putting movies that had been theatrical films on video where you could buy them. One of the earliest labels was called Magnetic Video, and their stuff. And back in those days, most of these companies were simultaneously releasing everything on VHS and Betamax, because back then Beta was still a competing format with VHS, and they were both about equally popular. They both took about half of the home video market, and VHS had not yet emerged as the clear winner, running Beta out of business is what ultimately happened. So that was the environment that these companies, like the ones I made movies for, came up. And for the first few years, they were only putting out major studio theatrical movies. Like some of the earliest movies to get a home video release were things like I Love My Wife with Elliot Gould, which was not a huge hit, but it was a major studio movie. And then also Last Summer was one of the earlier ones. And they were just some oddball movies, not necessarily the biggest hit from the major studios. They were the first ones to be the guinea pigs that they would make and test this new video market. And then, of course, there was tons and tons of porn. Even from the beginning, porn was very popular. And then after a couple of years of this, some people got the bright idea that these companies could maybe put out movies that are not theatrical movies, but that are just low-budget movies shot with video cameras. And so some of the earlier ones to do this were The Boarding House, and then there was a movie called The Ripper with Tom Savini, which was one of the earliest ones to get wide national release. In fact, The Ripper, I think, just came out in a new deluxe edition.
Yeah, I think so.
I wasn't one of the first ones to do it, but I saw the success of The Ripper. I saw it in every video store, and The Boarding House. Those were the two that I saw everywhere. And I saw, people are just now making movies that are made with cheap video cameras, and they're getting them in as many stores as the major theatrical movies from major studios. And so I said I should try to do this, because I had made movies all through the 70s. I'd made all these short films in Super 8 millimeter, but I'd never done anything professional with them. But so I knew in order to do this, in order to compete with this new market, I needed to have three things. I needed to have a cameraman with access to a commercial grade camera, because you didn't want to just shoot on a normal home format half-inch video camera. You needed to shoot on a commercial grade videotape, which meant either usually 3/4 inch, 1 inch, or Beta SP. Number two, I need to have editing facilities, because back then editing videotape was very expensive and very few people had all that equipment you needed to have it. I mean, people didn't have laptops with editing software back then like everybody does now, or having editing software on your phone. If you wanted to edit a video movie you shot on video back then, you had to go to a video studio with all this expensive equipment and you would edit it in a linear fashion, where you had to build your edit master from the head of the tape to the tail of the tape, and which was a very painstaking process. And so I met a guy who had the two things I needed. He had the commercial grade cameras and he had the editing studio. He had all this expensive equipment. And then the third thing I needed was somebody that could do gore effects, because I knew if I was going to make a horror movie and I needed it to be commercial, it needed to have gore effects, because at the time, in the early 80s, gore effects were really, really hot because of Friday the 13th movies and because of Dawn of the Dead loaded with gore effects. And so I was lucky enough to meet some guy who had been Tom Savini's assistant, and he had worked for Tom Savini on Day of the Dead, which I was in actually as a zombie, but the days that I filmed and the days that he filmed were not the same days. So even though we were both on this movie, we never met on that movie. I met him completely separately. And so I hired Tom Savini's assistant to be my gore guy. I hired the other guy with the camera and the editing facility. He had thousands of dollars worth of equipment that I couldn't afford. I brought him in. I couldn't afford to hire this guy. So I told this guy, what if I just make you a partner in the movie and we'll split the proceeds of the movie? Will you do it for me then? And he said, yeah, I'll shoot the movie and I'll edit it for you if you make me your partner. So that's how I got my first movie going, by making a partner with all this expensive equipment and hiring Tom Savini's makeup guy, who I did what little money I had to spend on this movie, I spent on hiring Tom Savini's assistant and also hiring a lead actress who had a little notoriety. I hired she wasn't I would call a celebrity. Her name was Mary Finero, but she had been in a very well distributed horror movie called Truth or Dare, directed by Tim Ritter. She had been the star of Truth or Dare, which was in all the video stores back then. It had incredible distribution, and lately it's been on a lot of talk shows with Elijah Wood talking about it and telling everybody that it's his favorite horror movie of all time. He's been on several talk shows talking about Truth or Dare. So anyway, Tim Ritter helped me, and he introduced me to Mary Finero, who had been in his movie, and said, she just did my movie, I'm sure she'd love to do yours too. So I had her, so she had a little bit of a name value, although not a lot. And so that was pretty much my budget, paying Mary Finero and paying Tom Savini's assistant. And then, well, beyond that, all my only expenses were incidental. And with all that underway, I made my first movie and I entered the video market. And then from there, I just kept on knocking them out. But the video, as I continued to make these movies, the video market changed. Then pretty soon all the mom and pop video stores went away, and I was now making them in an environment where I was trying to have Blockbuster Video as my customer. And today I'm in an all new environment. Today, when I make movies, Walmart and Amazon are my customers, because all my movies lately have been listed by Walmart and Amazon, and they're also on a lot of streaming sites. Some of my movies are on Tubi, some are on other streaming sites. And so it's a whole new market, but as long as there's customers, you can continue to do this. You just always got to have customers, whoever they may be.
Yeah, well, you're talking to one of them. This is a guy right here that I love. I love physical media. It's my thing. And well, obviously Amazon is where I watched right when I had invited you onto the show. I watched Bigfoot Exorcist. It was on Amazon, I think. And so I don't own that on physical or anything like that, but I will at some point. I really like that movie a lot.
My other new movie, Shark Exorcist 2. Now that's one that's really worthwhile getting on physical media, because when you get the DVD, you actually get two completely separate versions of the movie. We did two complete versions, which have completely different special effects in each movie. My producer who produced this movie with me, while I released it, they hired two completely separate effects houses that do CGI, and they let these two companies take a go at the movie, and each of these companies did all the effects from top to bottom on the movie. And then Wilder had to decide which company did the better job, which one to release. And they liked them both so much that they just decided to put both versions of the movie on the DVD. So when you get the Shark Exorcist 2 DVD, you can watch the movie twice with completely different special effects in each.
I mean,
I've never heard of any company doing that before. Usually people don't have the budget to hire two effects companies just so you can have the luxury of deciding which one did the best job once you're through. That's very unusual. I've never heard of anyone doing that before. It may have been maybe they just hired the first company and thought somebody else could do better and then hired the second company. That may be a more likely scenario of what happened. But however it happened, it's the customer is the beneficiary, because when you get the DVD, you get two completely different versions, and they both have. I like both of them. They both did a good job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool. Yeah, especially because like it's not cheap to do effects, and so many companies like kind of go under. Like it's a really tough business. So that's actually really cool that you're able to actually feature both versions too and get both companies' names out there. So I think not only does the consumer benefit, but obviously both of those companies have that added benefit of that shared release as well.
Yeah.
And of course the Red Lips Blu-ray from Saturn's Core is just packed with special features. So there's a lot of value in getting the Blu-ray of Red Lips, because when you do that, you get tons and tons of special features. There was some special features that I didn't even know existed that they found out, and they also hired a film historian friend of mine to do a video essay about it. And there's just all sorts of. They went way above and beyond the special features. So when you get the Red Lips Blu-ray, I mean, there's probably an hour and a half or 2 hours just of special features.
Did they reach out to you at all for any special features, or is there like a new commentary or any tracks like that involved?
Yeah, I did a commentary for it.
Sweet. Yeah, they're all of these boutique companies, man. They're putting so much, diligent effort into these releases. It's something like I'm very proud to be a consumer, and in a world where spending money sucks, like I spend a lot of money on this stuff. I just reached out to Saturn's Core. We're gonna have an episode just about them coming up, I think next week. So I'll have to let them know that we had spoken to you as well.
Yeah, it's very odd how the market today is the only bad thing about the market today is your movie has to almost be horror, sci-fi, or fantasy, or it's like next to impossible to get distribution for it. If your movie doesn't fall into one of those genres, it's very. I mean, like I have two movies that I control the distribution of that I've been trying to place in the market that both have celebrities in them, and I can't place either of them. No, I can't find a distributor that's interested in either of them because they aren't horror, sci-fi, or fantasy. I've got one movie that's just a political documentary I made, but it stars Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys, stars Keith Gordon,
nice.
the star Christine, and Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill, and then it stars Mike Farrell, one of the stars of the TV show MASH with Alan Alda. So I got these three guys, and they basically are political commentators in my documentary, which I made in 2003 about the Iraq War. So, but just distributors are not interested in that at all, even as a political curio. I thought even with Jello Biafra they'd be interested, but yeah. Then I have another movie that a friend of mine made that I co-produced with him called Whacked, which is a comedy about con men, and nobody's interested in that either because it's just a comedy, but it's not horror or sci-fi comedy. It's just a comedy about con artists, and it's got Kato Kalin in it. He's the host of it, but even with him in it, nobody seems to be interested in it. Everybody I've mentioned to it, some of my regular distributors, they all just show that they have zero interest in a movie about con men. So it just taught me a valuable. Don't ever be associated with a movie that's not horror, sci-fi, or fantasy.
Yeah, it is what sells now for sure. It is weird kind of seeing how the industry has changed so much as far as streaming goes and the superhero movies, that comedies in particular just kind of disappeared. Like they nobody seems to really
Uh,
care about
I
them at
mean, for a
all.
comedy, you really have to have huge stars. If you don't have huge stars, then it's not really worth doing. So I thought Kato Kalin, at least as a name everybody knows, he's the only star we could afford because we checked the prices of several stars, and Kato was the only one in our price range.
It's so funny. I have to bring up the synchronicity again because we did an interview with stand-up comedian Matt Negan, not Negan,
Megan,
um,
yeah.
2 nights ago, and he had talked about working on a movie with him. So that's so weird that this conversation has kind of blended into all of our recent discussions outside of it.
Well, I
Um,
know Fred Olen Ray made a movie with Kato, but he was able to get distribution for his because his was sort of an erotic thriller, and those are, if you make an erotic thriller, those, or at least used to be, very commercial. There was a period, especially 20 years ago, when erotic thrillers were very much in demand, even if they were cheap ones. But
yeah.
I think that's not much anymore. I think that genre has sort of cooled off.
Um,
You don't hear about a lot of low budget erotic thrillers anymore.
no, not since who owns HBO owns Cinemax now, and Cinemax was kind of a proponent of that. So you'd always be able to at least kind of see some of those back. I remember in the day on Cinemax, but since HBO bought them, that kind of disappeared. Full Moon doesn't really even do them too much anymore either. They used to. I can't remember the name of the subsidiary of Full Moon, but they had a whole production company that put those out. Um,
Yeah, everything Full Moon does lately is very commercial and very clever titles. You know, like they just made a movie called Barbieheimer that's a cross between Barbie and the
Oppenheimer.
Atomic Matters movie, the
yeah,
Frankenheimer. So Barbieheimer, that's a very good name for a movie. And I made a spoof of Barbie too because I just did Darby Screamhouse, which is for Wild Eye releasing. So they'll be putting that out probably next year.
so how do you pick your new projects that you're working on now that you shoot digitally?
Well, I always come up with a title of all my movies, and then um, so basically, you know, once I have a title that I'm happy with, I just test it and run it by a bunch of my friends and see if they think it's a good title. And or sometimes I don't even do that. If I come up with a title that I just love and I'm so convinced that it's perfect, I don't ask anyone's opinion. Like when I made Debbie Does Demons, I thought that was such a perfect title. I didn't even ask anyone's opinion. I knew that was a perfect title. Same with Hooker with a Hacksaw. Those are some titles that I really love those titles, and so I didn't really need anybody's affirmation of whether they were good or not. I just went right out and made them because I knew those were great titles. Yeah, of all my titles recently, I think Debbie Does Demons is my favorite title.
Yeah, for sure. There's a long history of Debbie does titles, that borrows and parodies from. So that is
But my new movie that comes out in October, Catnado, we're already getting more press on it than of my last several movies. We're just getting, I mean, of all my movies, the one that got the most press by far was Shark Exorcist, which came out about 9 or 10 years ago. That one got the most international press, and it was distributed in 5 countries. And in Japan, it was a theatrical release. And the same with Shark Exorcist 2. It's also a theatrical release in Japan. They're really crazy for it. In fact, in Japan, they love Shark Exorcist so much they've not only released it 3 times, but in the last time they released it, they put it out in this deluxe edition that blows away any deluxe edition I've ever had any of my movies in before. It came in a big box, and when you open the box, you got the movie, a T-shirt, a keychain, a paperback copy of the screenplay in both English and Japanese, and a color magazine with color photos from the movie, all in this one collector's box. So I'd like to see an American company go do that for one of my movies.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's
My new
awesome.
one, Shark Exodus 2, they actually made a doll of the main character of the shark, the demon shark. And so if you're a Japanese fan, you can buy the movie. And of course, they also put out a T-shirt, but they also just released this doll character of the shark, which I've seen photos of. I wish they'd send me one of them, but they did send me a copy of the deluxe box for the first one. But yeah, I need to get my hands on one of these dolls. I've never had a character from one of my movies. Well, I have before. Somebody made a action figure of the Star of Hooker with a Hacksaw, but it was a limited edition. It wasn't sold to the public, whereas the one in Japan is actually a doll that you can actually buy in normal toy stores. So that's the first time I've had a character from one of my movie become a doll that the public can buy in normal stores.
We'll have to
But
reach out to Spooky
unfortunately,
Japan.
Right.
We have some friends who do a paranormal show in Japan, and I'm gonna have to reach out to them, see if they can find one of these sharks and have them send it over. Get some of this stuff imported to us.
just go all. I mean, like 2 months ago, they had the 2 stars of Shark Exorcist were in Japan, and so I told the Japanese distributor, "Hey, my 2 stars are going to be in town. If you want to meet them." And so they decided to create this special event for them. So they had a screening of the movie at this movie theater in Tokyo, where they had a red carpet and treated them like superstars and put them on stage and had the audience interview them. And then they passed out masks of my face to everyone in the audience. So while my stars are on the stage, everyone in the audience is wearing a mask of my face. So that was really bizarre. I'd like to get one of those masks too, but I've never heard of any U.S. company going to such lengths for a movie.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But
Yeah,
basically told me that if I want to have that kind of a reaction from my Japanese distributor, the only thing is you should always put the word shark in your title, because if you have the word shark in your title, the Japanese distributor will go crazy for it. So that's why I'm making Weird Shark right now. I'm trying to make another one that make the Japanese fans happy.
I love shark exploitation. It's one of my favorite genres. It doesn't matter what decade. I know like there are some shark exploitation purists out there that only want Italian cinema from the 70s and 80s. Cruel Jaws being one of them from Severin that I had got when they had the guts to put it out under the Jaws 5 title, and then they got in a lot of
Yeah.
trouble. But
Yeah, I saw Cruel Jaws. That was a good one. But I mean, for most people now, when Jaws first came out in 1975, and then immediately there were imitators making movies that cashed in on it. All the imitators initially were filming real sharks, like Tintorera Tiger Shark with Susan George. All the sharks in that movie were real sharks that they photographed.
Oh, there's that 30% creeping back in. Oopsies.
we might have lost
looks-
we might have lost Donald. We're gonna keep going here for a minute, just in case he is able to jump back in. That was there he is.
Maybe it wasn't.
I got bumped out.
Yeah. Oh, we lost you for a second.
But yeah, so these early ripoffs of Jaws were all with real sharks, but nowadays, it's all CGI sharks. In fact, when I shot the original Shark Exorcist, I went to the aquarium and filmed real sharks for most of the shark shots, where we would only need to use CGI very sparingly. But the distributor decided that it would be better just to go with CGI from top to bottom. So the version you see is it's more consistent, because every time you see the shark, it's the same CGI shark. So they were right, because if you were just switching back and forth between, sometimes you're seeing a CGI shark and sometimes you're seeing a real shark, the shots wouldn't match very well. But for this new one, Shark Exorcist 2, they hired an all-new CGI. They hired, like I said, 2 different CGI houses, both of which were way better than the original company. So they both did a job way, way, way better. In fact, I've seen movies that I know have 6-figure budgets where I don't think their CGI is as good as the CGI we have in Shark Exorcist 2. So I'm really proud of how good the CGI looks in the new version.
Yeah, that's something that
I just saw Charles Van Full. Yeah, I just saw this Charles Van Full Moon movie recently, and I'm not going to name the movie, but it had just pure shitty CGI. And I thought, wow, my CGI in Shark Exodus 2 is 20 times better than this crap. So even Charles Van is, he must be saving money by having really crappy CGI, because it was just terrible what I saw in one of his new movies. But so I'm really happy with the CGI we've got in Shark Exodus 2. And most of the reviews that have watched it, they're commenting on how much better it looks than the first one.
That's kind of like their shtick now. A buddy of mine had just sent me a couple of images from a film that they put out called Bad CGI Gator. So they've even kind of made it like a tongue-in-cheek thing where everybody's kind of in on the joke that
I saw the trailer to that. Yeah.
But the
CGI that I saw in the movie called Bad CGI something or other, it actually looks way better than the CGI in this other new movie I saw. So the Bad CGI movie is not the worst they put out.
Yeah, well,
we have quite a lot of CGI in Catnado too, because we had to have somebody create the tornado full of cats. So I'm happy with those shots too. You can see a few of those shots in the trailer, and they look nice too. So we're happy with that, because we needed a few shots like that to sell the idea in Catnado that there would be a swirling Catnado full of cats. And so that's why. And Catnado is just getting more press than anything I've done since Shark Exorcist. It's getting, just recently, one of the top newspapers in London ran a big spread about it, and we're getting quite a lot of international press. I mean, anytime I go onto Google and do a search for press about Shark Exorcist, a search for press about Catnado, I'm finding more and more new stuff. So that's why we're doing Catnado too, just because of the reaction we're already getting from the first one. Also because I've come up with the perfect storyline for it, which I think is way better than the storyline in the first one. So I thought of a way to NATO 2 and make it way better than the first one.
Yeah. How do you come up with a storyline for something like that? Because, sitting there and thinking to yourself, I'm going to make a movie about tornadoes with cats. Yeah, so there's the first movie. So now we're coming up with the second one.
A lot of people, when they write scripts, they write it from the you have to always, I always have to have the title or what I think will be the title first, because you have to have the concept. And I always go with concept titles where the title tells you what the movie's about. I don't like to use generic titles. Like Scream would be considered a generic title, but they can get away with that because they had huge stars in it. So when you have huge stars, you can get away with a generic title that doesn't tell you anything about the movie. But if you're doing a low budget movie, I like to use concept titles. And an example of a concept title would be Hooker with a Hacksaw, Cannibal Hookers, Chainsaw Cheerleaders, Dorm of the Dead, Shark Exorcist, because those are concept titles that tell you what you can expect to see in the movie. So sometimes a concept title is more valuable than a celebrity. Just having a good exploitable concept title that will intrigue people and make people want to write about your movie, that can get you a good concept title can in many cases get you more press and more attention for your movie than if you had an expensive celebrity in it. I mean, I've gone both ways. I've hired expensive celebrities to be in my movies before, and a lot of times it doesn't pay off, and a concept title would have done just as well as the celebrity. So, but when I'm actually sit down to write the script, I always think of the ideal way to write a script is you have to have one primary character that has a story arc that goes through the movie, and you have to have a story arc where something happens where they're in conflict, and the conflict is either resolved, or if it's going to be a situation where they're going to be the final girl or whatever. But you need to think in terms of having at least one character that carries you through the movie so that the audience has somebody to identify with. So you have to think which character in this movie is going to be the one that the audience will identify with or have empathy for. You can't just have a bunch of characters that the audience is going to hate every character in the movie. You need to have at least one character that they're going to root for. And then the thing I like to do most is I like to have this character want something, and then the whole plot of the movie has got this subtext where while you think you're watching a horror movie, you're also watching the story of this character's journey while they try to achieve this goal that they want. That's I started using that idea with my very second feature, which was Cannibal Hookers, because on the surface it's a movie about hookers that eat their customers, but it also was a story about two girls that felt like they were outsiders and didn't have any friends and didn't fit in with their group. So they decided to join a sorority because they think if they're a sorority, they'll be instantly accepted and it'll raise their social standing. And so they're willing to go to any length to join a sorority in order to increase their social standing and have friends and have, sort of a self-esteem that they don't have in their real life. So that was what was in the back of my mind as I was writing the script about these girls' search for self-esteem. And then when I wrote Cannibal Hookers, I kept that in mind and tried to follow those girls' journey through the script. And then when I wrote Debbie Does Demons, Debbie is the witch played by Justice Flux is the main character, and her goal was to conquer the world and turn everyone into demons. But the whole movie is about her journey to accomplish that end and all the obstacles that happen in her way, like being almost burnt at the stake by a witch finder, and then she has to overcome all these obstacles in order to accomplish her ultimate goal of world conquest. And then the next time I did a movie with Jessa, I had her play a character with a much simpler goal. Instead of having world conquest be her goal, when I did Shark Exorcist 2, I wrote Jessa as a character whose goal was to have a luxury vacation in Destin, Florida. And so that's her only goal. And so all through the movie, that's all she talks about is hitting up all these men and using all these men just because she wants to find somebody that will give her the luxury vacation that she thinks she deserves. Then using that as my foundation, I built the whole script around that. But that's what I like to do. I like to have lead character, and most of the time lately it's Jessa, because I've done 6 movies in a row with her. I like to give Jessa something to wish for, and then if you give your main character something to wish for and something to strive for, it makes them more interesting, and the audience can kind of root for them or not root for them. So I'm doing the same thing with Catnado. In Catnado, there's something Jessa wants, and the whole story of Catnado will be about not only her battling the tornadoes of cats, but also will she get what she wants, and the weird way she achieves it.
How long
So
does it
I'm thinking
usually?
of two things when I'm writing a script. I'm thinking about the character's journey, but I'm also thinking about it's got to have the exploitable elements that the fans will like. It's got to have so much gore and so much mayhem, so much sexiness, So you got to have all those elements in there. So I'm trying to satisfy myself, and I'm trying to satisfy the fans.
Yeah. How long does it usually take you to finish a script?
That's it can be different. Usually it's about I write them very slowly. I don't just sit down and write them, like a job. I just, like maybe like two. I don't ever like to write more than 2 pages a day. So at the rate I go, I just take my time and usually spread out the writing over 2 months usually, because I really don't like to write more than 2 or 3 pages a day. For Debbie Does Demons, I had to write the entire script twice, because the first time we wrote it, I wrote it with another actor being the main character and Jessa being a subordinate character. And then this actor, before we could shoot, after we'd only shot his first scene, this actor passed. And so we only had this one scene we'd shot with him, and we couldn't do the whole movie as scripted with him being the star. So I completely rewrote the whole movie and made Jessa's character the star. And so I just, unfortunately had to throw out the original script and reconceive it all the way through. When I did the original Cannibal Hookers, we had something not quite as horrible, but also something that caused me to have to redo the script. We shot 2/3 of the movie, and we were shooting it sort of chronologically, which is sort of rare, but 2/3 of the way through the shooting, when we're 2/3 of the way through the story, our male lead was in a motorcycle wreck and broke his leg and couldn't film anymore. So I had to completely rewrite the whole last few scenes of the movie where he's supposed to be doing heroic stuff and saving the girls. So I had to explain why his character disappears and why these new characters come in and they become sort of the heroes of the movie. So sometimes weird, unusual things happen and you have to make adjustments. So I always think it's, a triumph whenever I can write a script and I'm able to film the script as I wrote it with nothing happening at the last minute to make me change it. If that happens, then I'm always a happy camper. So at least for the last few movies I've done, like the Darby Screamhouse and Blood Bitch Baby, and Shark Exodus 2. There's been no calamities during the filming, so for those I was able, and also Big Good Exorcist, I was able to film the script I wrote and not have to make any last minute changes. So that is the ideal situation with no disasters.
For Bigfoot Exorcist, like I said, I had watched that very recently, and I was super impressed by it because the way it's edited, it almost looks like you at times didn't even have actors in the same room, but still managed to like uh, piece the movie together. Like, is that something that I just kind of made up while watching it, or did you run into any situation like that where you
It
had
was
to?
Bigfoot Exorcist was always designed to be a movie with three parallel storylines, which would all come together, and so that was the structure of it, and that's how it was written. It was written with three storylines: the storyline of Jessica Flux and her boyfriend, played by Ford Windstar, then the storyline of the nun who did the original exorcism, and then the storyline of the the couple, the two girls who are going to have the encounter with the Bigfoot exorcist. And so then all these characters sort of have separate storylines, and then they all get together at the end where all the storylines merge. And Shark Exodus 2 had the same structure. It was a storyline with Jessa and her quest to go to Destin. Then it was the storyline about the priest who's determined to defeat the shark. And then it was a storyline about the two girls who we first meet at the amusement park who are going to eventually encounter the shark, then encounter the priest. And then one of them is going to even enter Jessa's storyline. So, and then at the end of the movie, all three storylines come together. So that's a structure I like to use. So I've used it twice, where it's three storylines that start separately and then they all come together.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. That was on Amazon. I know there's some other places that people can grab it to check it out. I'm gonna definitely look into importing this Shark Exorcist thing from Japan because it sounds like something that needs to be on my shelf. But we've kind of already hit that hour mark that we usually like to end things on the show, and it's always a pleasure to hit that mark and it feels like 10 or 15 minutes just went by. This was a lot of fun for me, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it too. Um, is there anything that you want to plug? Do you have any appearances or any other films coming out that
Yeah,
people will be able to
I
get?
do have an appearance coming up. Jess Flux and me are both going to be guests at the Rocket City Horror Convention in Huntsville, Alabama, in January. So if anybody just goes to Google and types in Rocket City Convention in Huntsville, it'll probably have more and more info on it as it gets closer to that date. But we'll both be there at that convention in Huntsville, Alabama, in January. The other thing I have to plug is there's a new book that just came out that I worked with, that I wrote the introduction for. It's a British book that was published in England, and it's about people who in the 70s and 60s like to collect movies on Super 8, because before video came along in 79 and 80, if you wanted to collect movies, you had to collect them on film. And for most people, that meant collecting 8mm and Super 8mm digest versions. And so there was this whole culture of collecting movies on Super 8, usually cut down versions where they were 3-minute this digest or 10-minute digest. And then sometimes, if you're willing to spend a couple $100s, you could buy the entire movie or almost the entire movie on Super 8mm. So that was a huge thing in the 60s and 70s. When I was growing up, I collected that stuff for 20 years before video came along. And so there's a new book that's all about that, with the history of all these companies in America and England and Germany and all over Europe that used to put out these movies on Super 8 in the 60s and 70s. And so it's called bootlace cinema. Bootlace is a British term which means shoestring. So it just basically means cheap cinema. So it's, but these companies, they would put out all the, even not just cheap movies, they would put out all the biggest movies in the world. They would put out Star Wars, The Poseidon Adventure, all these movies were put out on Super 8 before video came along. So But right after Star Wars came out, you could buy a home version of Star Wars for your home projector if you bought this Super 8 digest version. And I remember you could buy the digest version of Barbarella or just pretty much any big movie you named. All the big studios were in on it. Paramount and 20th Century Fox, they all allowed all of their biggest movies to be released on Super 8. So a lot of people that are younger don't probably remember those days. They only remember back to the video era. But if you remember what it was like before video came along, that's how it was. If you wanted to collect movies and you didn't have the money to have your own 16 millimeter projector or your own 35 millimeter projector in your home, then that's what you did. You collected on Super 8. You bought a cheap Super 8 millimeter projector.
Yeah,
It
man.
was like, I still got a box full of all my Super 8 movies from those days. I still keep most of them.
I was just gonna say, I wonder what a Star Wars Super 8 runs for these days in 2024.
Well, if you go to eBay now, you can find tons of this stuff from the 60s and 70s on sale. All you do is go to eBay and type in Super 8 millimeter color sound or Super 8 millimeter color or Super 8 millimeter black and white, and it'll give you a list of all the movies that people are selling that are from. But since these movies are now over 40 or 50 years old, these prints that they're selling, because the Super 8 business died as soon as video came along, it killed the Super 8 business. And so if you buy them now, the color is usually just gone to red, because these 40 and 50-year-old movies, after that much time has passed, the color just has drained out and they're all pink or red. So most of them, even if you buy them, the color is going to look awful. The only ones I would recommend buying are the movies that were made in black and white, because they still look good. But the ones made in color are pretty much just unwatchable now, unless you just want to look at a red color for everything being red or everything being pink.
Yeah. That happened. I went to a drive-in where I live. There's a couple drive-ins that do like huge events where they use the old prints and some of the old 35 millimeters, and they still avoid digital. And I can't remember what movie it was, but the print was so beat up and so old that the whole movie that we were watching on the screen was pink. But yeah, hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
It's not every day you get to talk to a legend. So this was a lot of fun. We'd love
glad to have done it, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to chat again sometime. Everybody check the films out, and jump on the old Google machine and check out those appearances that he's going to be doing. Thank you for joining us, and I'll hit the outro, and if you wish, you are absolutely free to go from that point on. And everybody have a fantastic
have a great night, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The preceding program has been brought to you by the Watchers Podcast Network. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends to help grow our network. Check us out on all social media platforms, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thanks for your support.